Hey guys, Urban Architect here, and welcome back to Canada. I'm super excited to be back, and these next several episodes are in my opinion some of the best builds I've ever done. And today we're going to start expanding into that downtown framework that I laid in episode 10 by building into the blocks directly in front of Union Station. And we're going to be using Reaper's incredible Living Shangri La asset to create an office development that will be an icon of our city. And before we get into the build, don't forget to leave a like or subscribe if you enjoy the video, as it does really help grow the channel. Now before I start placing the buildings of the IFC themselves, I first made a quick tram tunnel. As while you can see that there is no tram line running on that 4-lane one-way road, there is one just one block west that I wanted to come up and finish in Union Station. And this tunnel was rather hard to make because of that terrain ruining and the fact that I really didn't have that much space to work with. But regardless, I ended up using some PO, some ploppable surfaces, and these retaining walls with fences just to make it all work and make sure no one falls in. Having completed a rough outline of how the tunnel would be built, I placed the buildings I'll be using on this block just so that I could figure out how this was all going to come together. And the buildings I used are Reaper's brand new Living Shangri La from Vancouver asset, which is absolutely beautiful and does a phenomenal job of defining our skyline. And what I love about using this building is that with it, the two tallest buildings in our city are the tallest buildings in Toronto and Vancouver respectively. And now this block will be rather large, so I had to delete some roads, and I'm just adjusting the road detailing to that new reality. And a bike path continues on through the middle of the block where I deleted the road, and this bike path will connect Union Station with the downtown core and the bike lanes running through the middle of it. And now for this build, and really for my downtown at large, I'll be using these concrete pedestrian path networks to cover over sidewalks, serve as paths, and save myself the trouble of having to cover every exposed inch of pavement with decals. And for this park in front of the IFC and Union Station, I went with a very simple approach to its landscaping and networks, going for a lot of exposed grass, plenty of pedestrian connections, and the only real artificial decorations will be some tables and benches. I didn't really want this park to be a tourist attraction in and of itself because it's already surrounded by landmarks, and it's much more important that it serve as a vital pedestrian thoroughfare rather than draw a crowd. Now the area in front of the IFC and by the tram tunnel will have straight lines and sharp angles, dividing the area into squares and rectangles. Whereas opposite the bike path, which divides the two sections, there will be another office tower surrounded by paths at the ground level and just barely fitting into the space that's effectively divided by the metro tracks. And the building itself is two slightly modified Skytrust banks by King Leno, and it's an awesome building that always finds its way into my cities and will doubtless make another appearance or two later on into this series. Anyhow, at the base of the Skytrust Tower will be a concrete rectangle and then several curved paths connecting it to the sidewalks and other paths. And the webbed area of paths does create several unique yet pleasant shapes and makes the park much more striking when viewed from the air or from the buildings themselves. I next went and filled the areas by the North IFC Tower with decals of the same concrete texture as the paths, and then right here on this side I've made some perfect squares of grass just to give a very developed and controlled feel to the landscaping. And when I eventually get to building this area, I'll probably replace these squares and the trees on them with some pools. And in order to keep building that controlled landscaping feel, I use these manicured grass decals to cover over all of our grassy areas. And when you convert a decal into a procedural object, it becomes visible at only one height. And since the paths are slightly raised off the grass, I didn't have to reshape any of the decals to fit them perfectly into the odd shapes created by the curved paths. And I'm going to be lining Victoria Avenue with some young London plane trees, which look amazing in this new lighting that I finally perfected. And the trees give the entire downtown a much greener feel, which was one of the main things I was aiming for with this park build, as it further pedestrianizes the core and adds some much needed green spaces. Having placed the trees, I added some decals just to finalize our bike path, and in this grassy area by the path, I added some tables for people to eat their lunches on. And it's important to note that this park isn't built for families or tourists even, but rather for the office workers and professionals who would be living in this area and would likely be the only ones able to afford doing so. And since this is an extremely landscaped park, I'll be using only 2 types of trees, with the only exception being this very big tree in the middle. That is the main landmark or icon of this park instead of, say, a fountain or a sculpture. And over in the area with the curved paths, which is definitely a more park-like area compared to the other side, which is basically a plaza on grass, I placed some benches underneath some pergolas lining the paths, and in addition to serving a more useful purpose, from an aesthetic standpoint, these pergolas are very useful as they add some non-green color to the park. And then once I finished the IFC park, I moved across Victoria Avenue and detailed this exposed block that's remained empty for the entirety of the series. And I used the same concrete networks as I did for the rest of the downtown to create a perfect rectangle within which I placed one of these really cool water surface props by Pecora, which is perfect for this kind of pool, and I'll definitely be using more of these throughout the series. I then surrounded it with the same London plane trees as I used across the road and just placed some benches around it. And that area by the condo with the grass I later went and replaced with a sunken tram station that looks really awesome. But unfortunately the footage of that build just, I guess, was never recorded. I don't know where it went. And so I'll just have a screenshot of that tunnel as the end screen of the video after the cinematics. And that is it for this episode of Canada, and man am I glad to be in this city. And the next episode will see us building further along Victoria Avenue and upzoning some of the stuff we built way back in episode 2. And if you want to catch any of that, don't forget to leave a like or subscribe, and if you want to watch it early, you can enjoy early access and a bunch of other perks on my Patreon. Thanks for watching, have a great day, and I'll see you next time in Canada.